Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan Helon. I'm part of the Rev1 team here. I'm responsible for our investment funds. And I'm really fortunate to work with these two gentlemen here, Nick Potts and Larry Scott. These gentlemen, as Heather mentioned, they're the co-founders of ScriptDrop. ScriptDrop's a game-changing prescription drug delivery, patient medication reminder, and adherence technology company. And these guys will correct whatever I got wrong there, but that's what I think it is. And Nick and Larry bring an incredible pedigree, to leading ScriptDrop, as they both were early employees at CoverMyMeds and played key roles there in the company's tremendous growth and success. So Rev1 is very pleased to be an early investor in ScriptDrop, and I'm fortunate to work with these guys as a member of their board of directors, and have really enjoyed that experience and interaction with the company thus far. So we're greatly fortunate to have Nick and Larry here today as our interview guests, and we've already given them a round of applause. Let's give them one more warm welcome. Nick and Larry. Thank you. So, gentlemen, maybe start with Nick, the founder and CEO, along with your co-founder there. Give us the elevator pitch for ScriptDrop and tell us some of the exciting things happening with the company.
So, elevator pitch. ScriptDrop is a prescription delivery service and medication reminders for patients. The very key element of our technology is we're in the workflow of the pharmacist. So they do not have to download an app or anything to use our service. They can just bill our BIN number, which is how they bill your health plan each day to check to see if that health plan will pay for your prescription. The exact same process they can undergo to kick off a delivery or medication reminders for the patient.
Excellent. You're thinking about some really interesting and novel ways to, motivate patients to take their medications and things like that. So what are some of the, interesting and novel ways you guys are thinking to, increase patients getting their drugs, staying on therapy, and perhaps even incentivizing them to do that?
So in the U.S. healthcare system each year, medication abandonment and non-adherence costs the healthcare system about $300 billion per year. Even a lower number, but a worse statistic, is 125,000 patients lose their life from abandonment and non-adherence each year. So we kicked off the medication reminder pilot, and we asked ourselves, why would you as a patient respond to our medication reminder? We need that two-way feedback loop for there to be meaningful data and meaningful actions to be had from the data. But why would you answer our bot that's reminding you to take your medication each day? So we tackled that psychology component by incentivizing you to answer our medication reminder each day. And we're using that, we're using crypto tokens, so like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So we've created our own, and then we store those interactions on the blockchain. And then when you go back in to get your refill on day 31, like you should, you can then use those tokens to buy down part of your copay. So we are able to immediately make your healthcare as the patient cheaper.
Excellent. So that's a really compelling, product value proposition that is resonating with a lot of different stakeholders in the medical value chain. But translating that vision, into, a business model and business requirements. How did you guys know? And maybe Larry, you can address this from a technology development standpoint. How did you know you were building a product and organizing how your product worked to fit within the value chain and really garner adoption from these different stakeholders?
So I think a part of that is an unfair advantage. It's our experience. At our previous company, we had experience around doing a lot of similar things. So we had taken that knowledge and applying it to ScriptDrop is where we found the best way to do that. And me being a developer, from the ground up, I got to build a lot of that software and be a part of those decisions and seeing what makes good software from end to end. And we just took that same knowledge, applied with whatever Nick found on his side, because we worked on two different pieces of the pie there. He was on the pharmacy side, I was a developer. And Nick and I, we had a background of throwing things up against the wall and figuring out what works. And I'll let Nick speak to this, but he came to me with this idea, and it just made sense. I had my doubts at first, but Nick does his research, and he, once you see how Nick works, he goes end to end, he goes 100% in figuring out things out. But Nick, if you want to speak about how you came about to figure out the issue.
Just letting data tell the story. So big data analytics, that's a huge thing. It's a big buzzword in startups. But I found that patients were going to the pharmacy. So at that point, they showed intent that they want that prescription that the doctor had prescribed for them. But if the patient had to leave not on therapy and they were told to come back in a day or 2 days, 25% of those patients never returned. You lost them. And then I've traced it at different points through the supply chain or through the patient journey. Each time there's friction for the patient, you lose a very large bucket of them. So if you're asking them to do more work to get on therapy, you lose a large chunk of them. So the original premise was to offer prescription delivery, so you as the patient do less work to get on therapy.
Oh, that sounds really good. So I know we're still real early in the game with ScriptDrop, but the company, one thing that attracted Rev1 to investing in ScriptDrop was how much progress the company had made in a very short period of time with very limited capital. So even acknowledging that we're early in ScriptDrop's life, what are one or two of the breakthrough moments you guys would point to where you really realized you were onto something really big and you were, well, now on the road to pulling off, executing against that?
Once again, if you get to understand how Nick works, he brought me the idea where one day we were talking about it, the next day we were actually doing it. So being a developer, I'm naturally more methodical in how it would take me some time to think about it. I'll do a little bit more research, but he went heads first to talking to customers, to pharmacies, to potential couriers, and all of a sudden we had something that we could actually run with. We had a game plan from, I remember us sitting down and what was it? Was it Red Robin? Was it? I can't remember. Yeah, so he never eats his food, but he explained this idea to me, and I'm like, wait a minute, I had my reserves, but he's like, all right, figure it out. I got this and this and this. But it was just amazing to see how fast he can move, and he goes quick. So we kind of counterbalance each other in that standpoint.
For me, there's been several breakthrough moments. I think probably the largest one was our largest client now found us on LinkedIn, an article that one of their VPs had read. And he sent me a cold message on LinkedIn, and we gave them a demo. Then we got to fly out to Boise, which is where their headquarters is. So it's Albertsons. They have about 2,200 pharmacy locations. And after the meeting, after the presentation, it was Amanda and I, which is one of my coworkers, we were trying to gauge if the meeting went well. So you want that immediate feedback of, did they like our service? Their EVP offered to invest in us and really pushed us. So we had to decline that just because it could affect relationships with other pharmacy partners. But that was when we knew we were definitely going down the right path.
Yeah, that was a very exciting, breakthrough moment for sure. So you guys hit on this. So you work together at CoverMyMeds, but in different parts of the organization. Talk about how you guys came to get to know each other, in that prior relationship.
It's crazy. So as a developer, I had this thought of I could make cool stuff, and then hopefully people will buy it. So through whatever job or whatever stage of my career I was in, I was always building something and trying to sell it. So I just got done talking about this. I would think we were in the lunch line, and it was kind of like the Reese's peanut butter cup. I had peanut butter and he had chocolate, and we kind of put it together. I figured out he was working on stuff, I was working on stuff, and we had different skill sets, and we tried to come together and try to help each other's projects work. And then after that, we started some projects together. Had some mild successes, definitely some learning experiences that helped us lead up to funding and doing that whole round. But it was just a process of trying a whole bunch of things and seeing what sticks on the wall, and then eventually ScriptDrop was the thing that we could actually potentially hit a home run with.
And it also allowed us to have the building blocks of knowing that you have the right co-founder. There are rampant stories of co-founders arguing and it crippling the business or making it go out of business completely. And Larry and I know that won't happen with us just because we have that relationship established. He knows how I work, I know how he works, and we can feed off of one another for a better end result.
And so you guys started with the idea, but then you did develop it and refine it as you guys were sort of looking at spinning out, taking the leave, leaving CoverMyMeds and forming the company and building it. So you did an accelerator along the way early on. Tell us about that experience and what that brought to sort of refining the plan as it came together.
So it was Jumpstart Foundry in Nashville. So they are a healthcare investor. And we actually were their first class of investments that they went away from the accelerator model. So a little bit different. So they were still learning their way. But from our perspective, it was good to get a bunch of outsiders to look at what we were building and really question every decision that we were making, because you only know what you know. And sometimes outsiders coming in with that 10,000-foot view, they can let you know that you're looking at a problem from the wrong perspective, which that still happens to us today. That's why we're really big on going into our pharmacy partners and into the pharmacies and seeing their workflow, because we think we know everything or a lot, and then you can go into a pharmacy and realize you've forgotten 7 different things that could improve the process.
Also, that accelerator, they kind of condensed everything in kind of what was like a week's time. So they brought in like a whole bunch of industry experts, and they grilled us with questions. And Nick made a lifelong partnership with a guy there. It's a long story.
He hates me.
But yeah, it was a good experience. They provided a lot of resources, within a condensed amount of time. I think their thought was if they give us some money, we were the experts, and we would kind of report back to them. So we reported back to them, and they tried as much as they can they pulled in people from everywhere. It wasn't, some people from Nashville, some were out of the country, and they just tried with all the resources that they have to propel us forward. So it was a good experience. It was a good time in our life, I think, to not have to go through the accelerator program the traditional way where you pack up everything and move. I think it would have been a little difficult for me personally, but I'm glad that it worked out the way it did.
Well, we're glad you guys came back from Nashville. Nashville's a great city, but we're glad to have you in Columbus, of course. So you hit on one key theme there, kind of the importance of advisors and how that can impact the company. I think you guys have been really thoughtful about being really proactive about identifying advisors that could be strategic and bring a perspective to be valuable to ScriptDrop into the company. So talk a little about how you've gone about finding advisors for the business and engaging them to help you further, refine the plan.
From my perspective, it's just taking those meetings of different people that you respect, they have had some semblance of success. Even if it's someone that hasn't had a success with a company or something like that, but they understand healthcare, I need to constantly be learning. I want to constantly be improving, and I don't have the ability to do that if I'm not taking those meetings with customers or with advisors, potential advisors. You never know what you're going to get out of that coffee meeting at 7:30 in the morning.
Me personally, advisors for the company is great, and we're always looking to have those, but on a personal level too, we're in different roles and different career paths than we were previous. So looking to people that have been through it before in potential leadership roles is where I'm focused at too, where I'm trying to learn from them and provide the best support for our team and culture and everything as a whole. So just all the way from the top down to a personal level is where that mentorship and guidance is key for me.
That's great. So you hit on this a little bit, Larry, but talk a little about each of your individual trajectories. How did you come to be where you are today? We talked a little about the CoverMyMeds experience, but what was sort of each of your kind of career trajectories, and how did that sort of build to position you guys to do what you're doing now?
In the beginning, I thought I wanted to be a graphic designer. So I actually went to school, landed an internship, and studied development. I'm self-taught. That can be a good thing or a bad thing. But and then that led me to doing consulting, and then ultimately landing at CoverMyMeds, where I had no idea that I wanted to do healthcare. That wasn't even on my radar. I thought I wanted to build like a software as a service application and sell that. But the healthcare experience and also leveling up with great developers around me at CoverMyMeds allowed me to be where I'm at today. Definitely not the best developer, but I know how to relate to people and speak technically, which I think is a good skill set for me personally.
I just got to interject there because Larry's being far too humble. Amongst development talent in Central Ohio, you talk to people in the know, and they will tell you that Larry Scott is about as good as they get. So
Appreciate it.
That's a humble guy right there. Nick, how about you? How did you? What was your trajectory to get to where you're at now?
So I grew up in Nashville, and after graduating college, I moved to Columbus for my girlfriend at the time. She was a fashion designer at Abercrombie. So since then, we're married, so that all worked out. But when I moved here, it was a last-minute decision. Was she going to move back to Nashville, or was I going to move to Columbus? So when I came here, I didn't have a job lined up. Applied at a number of places, and enterprise, they hire you very quickly because their turnover rate is so high. So I was able to get a job there, and then it wasn't a terrible job. I didn't hate it or anything like that. Just the hours were very long, and it wasn't too intellectually stimulating because it was really monotonous. But then I was researching the top spots to work in Columbus for startups, and I landed on CoverMyMeds. And I actually applied there once and got turned down. And they told me to apply back in 9 to 12 months, and I thought it was just a soft no of, we hate you, but we don't want to be confrontational about it. But I applied again about 10 months later, and that's when I was subsequently hired, and I was the first technical account manager at CoverMyMeds. So I built out integrations with pharmacy systems across the US and then rolled it out to the pharmacy clients. So really great dual technical business role to learn a lot in a very short time frame.
So that CoverMyMeds experience is certainly very valuable, learning sort of the pipes and plumbing, as I always describe to my colleagues. Like, these guys really understand the pipes and plumbings of pharmacy and how drugs and payments and so on move through the system, and that's really critical. But if you think about sort of the pharmaceutical industry learnings, but just sort of seeing a startup scale in the manner that CoverMyMeds did and the trajectory is on, what was sort of the biggest takeaway you had from seeing that growth, being part of that growth? And it could be positive or negative. What did you learn either to try to replicate on that trajectory, or, boy, that's a pitfall that if we can avoid that, we'll even be better positioned to build this company?
My biggest takeaway from that was nothing is not in your job description. That it's kind of all hands on deck. Your marketing, sales, business development, tech, you just have to put your hands in there and get it done. And then getting comfortable being uncomfortable on just new things coming up and being able to adapt really quickly, which is something we're already having to do a lot with ScriptDrop.
The culture. They really invest a lot into making sure their people are number one. I've seen it on multiple occasions. It's not a lie. When you see the articles come out about the best place to work, hands down, best place I've ever worked. And then also the other thing is the trust that they put in their people too. If they put you in a position, they don't micromanage you. They trust, they brought you on for a certain expertise and they let you go with that. You have to report to people naturally, but they put you in a position of trust and they let you go. And it could be good or it could be bad. If you talk to some developers, you can see like why do we have so many different code bases and different flavors and languages. But for the most part, they trust their people. So I really enjoyed that while I was there.
That's excellent. Those are just some great dynamics to bring to this current situation. So shifting gears, you guys in many ways embody, I think, what entrepreneurs do to run lean as you're building a company. And Nick, you've got a great example of how you kept your personal burn rate low. Tell us about your time and how you convinced a fashion designer to live in a trailer with you.
Yeah, so it was when we started ScriptDrop. I left CoverMyMeds, and then Larry left shortly after, and we raised like $300,000, not a lot of money. But our goal with that money was to show that we could have product market fit, which if you build a product, in which we had done in the past together, we built a product that no one wanted. So we wanted to verify that multiple parties would pay for something that we built. In doing that, I viewed my personal burn as an extension of the company burn. So we cut down on personal expenses so extreme that we moved into a very small travel trailer in my parents' backyard. It was probably 2 months after we had gotten engaged. So I asked her to marry me, and then I give her this very drastic life step down. She hates this story. So the first night we were in the trailer, I think it hit her because she made great money at Abercrombie. Great money. She managed a team, had been there 6 years, and she quit that to help me and allow me to pursue the dream with ScriptDrop. The first night in the trailer, she cried. After that, she pulled herself together and she was like a champion. She helped us out with ScriptDrop. We would kick her side projects and everything, like our whole first year. So couldn't have done that without her, but it was just a small sacrifice that needed to be made.
She was definitely our first employee, unofficially.
Yeah. But. And Larry, how about you? You've got pretty busy life, married, 4 children. What, 1 to 12, 1 to 13?
Yeah, it ranges from 1 to 13.
So how do you balance the demands of being a startup CTO with, managing that family dynamic?
It's hard. So you have to make sure everything can be as stable as it can be, because you have kids to think about. You have the schools that they're in, and if anyone has kids, stability is the key. So you have to make it seem like everything's all right, even though we've hit our rough patches. We've had our ups and downs, but as long as you can provide that communication and let your wife know what's going on and what the plan is, and this is just a rough patch and we'll get over it, I think you'll do fine with communication, and try to keep that stability for the kids as well.
That's excellent. Well, you guys, I think everyone probably observes what a great co-founder dynamic you guys have and how well you work together, and I can certainly attest to that, what I've observed working with this great team. But talk a little bit about, interested from each of your perspective, what about each of you individually and the way you work together makes the partnership so effective?
Larry's really easygoing, so that's helpful, that he is easy to get along with. Everyone likes him immediately upon meeting him. I've always said when we have 100 employees at some point, they'll probably all like Larry better than they will me. But that's good. That speaks to how easy he is to work with, how adaptable he is. And we've been in really bad spots on just burn and just various things on getting products out overnight, on different promises that we had to make to secure a contract. And so we've been in the fire together, and he doesn't sweat. He comes out of it. He doesn't stress out and freak out. He just puts his head down and gets the work done.
And as far as Nick, I have to have respect for the way that he operates and gets things going. He's definitely a starter and a doer. So if you can align behind somebody that does that and support them with that, I think it's a great balance to have, because we can be talking about something today and then tomorrow we will actually have it. So he makes things materialize very quickly. And if I'm here to support that and do whatever I can, help the team out, put in whatever I need to do in terms of workload or hours, and figure things out, I think that's the good balance to have him be the tank, so to speak, in the front, and I'm the off tank, if for any of my gamers out there, but I'm the off tank. So,
well, as great as that partnership is, I mean, building a startup, high stress endeavor. So, how do you guys work through a situation where you have conflict? How do you confront that and get back on track?
This is great. We have a personal story that we actually went through something like this. It's about a week ago, where with the team, our roles have changed. So I don't think we were necessarily ready for that, mentally. I think we knew it was happening, but we just sat down. We went to a piata. We sat down, talked about it, and that was it. And then immediate action came out of that. So we talked about it, got everything off of our chest, and we moved forward. So I think if you think about it and you just kind of let the feedback pass through you and you dig through it and figure out what the gems are, and take that feedback and apply, hey, maybe I need to increase communication, or I need to do this. And if you actually act on it, because if your people are saying that, or if your co-founder is saying that, you need to take it seriously and don't get defensive and say, well, you did this, this, and this. We let the feedback pass through us, and we listen to it, and we take it sincere.
How do you guys do that in terms of thinking about the evolution of your roles at the company? I mean, it's the two of you, each of you are doing everything. If someone's not doing it, the other guy better be doing it. But as you now are building a team, is that intentional, or is it more organic in terms of how you see your role evolving? Do you think about very consciously, well, I'm just not going to do that anymore? Or is it more subtle as you gradually hand things off, as you bring people on the team, playing a different role that once was part of what you were doing?
The folks that we've hired so far, they are really top-end talent. So they came in and helped identify areas that they would fit in. And they're parts of their skill set. They're better at things that both Larry and I are terrible at. So they helped us identify that, and we slowly offloaded it to them. So it was a collaboration of what we needed and then also what they were already great at.
And to add to that is, if you know what you're bad at, I'm personally bad at organization, and I think you kind of are too, right? So, yeah. So adding people that can help with the organization to kind of keep us on task with that type of stuff. You got to see this guy's junk drawer, but they can keep us on task with that. Just identifying those weaknesses and filling in those gaps, I think if you're always aware of that, I think you'll win.
Excellent. So you guys talked a lot about the culture you're trying to build and being fortunate to hire really strong talent in the organization. How have you done that? What's been sort of your keys to bringing the right people onto the team that'll have the passion and capacity that you guys bring?
Some of the folks that we knew previously, so we were in a lucky spot. Once we get outside of our network, the risk level will go up dramatically. We've already started talking through that on just a way of identifying talent that's outside of our network. But those folks that have came on already, they were equally as dedicated to the larger vision as we are. So it's been good to see. It's kind of ramped up the efforts and the productivity for the entire team by bringing them on.
Anything else you'd add to that, Larry?
No, I think that was spot on.
Great. So you guys have mostly been going up and to the right with the progress of the company. It's been a really enjoyable thing for Rev One as an investor to watch that progress, but it's not always work out perfectly in terms of the progress. Talk about what was sort of one of the biggest challenges you guys have faced, the darkest moments where you really questioned whether or not this was going to work or not.
So let me think through something. Well, one is our business model. We rely on the pharmaceutical companies to subsidize part of the delivery cost. So at scale, in all of our projections, we would have margins on just the pharmacies paying, but that was at scale, not immediately. So the thought was we may lose a little bit on the pharmacy deliveries when they're paying, but then the pharmaceutical companies are able to pay so much that it completely crushes margins at that point. So then you also have the chicken and egg problem. The pharmaceutical companies, they don't care about your product if it's not distributed enough. If you're not in 10,000 pharmacies, they could care less because it doesn't move the needle for them from an ROI perspective. So then we work through the challenge of having to scale, maybe lose a little bit of money on every single delivery before we get to the point that we're signing really huge deals with AstraZeneca or Novo Nordisk. So we argued about that for about a week on just trying to figure out the best way to approach that. And we approached it from a different perspective. We reached out to our courier network and had a lot of very uncomfortable conversations on telling them their pricing was too high. If they want the business, here's the price that we need to pay them. It's either that or we're calling their competitor that's 10 miles down the road and they'll get the business. We were able to crush margins just on the pharmacies paying. So that's been a revelation that's happened over the last 2 or 3 weeks. We had to have a lot of very uncomfortable conversations, and there's some courier companies that probably don't like the name Nick Potts.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a wake-up call for all of us where, you had this ideal way of things were going to work out, and just being aware and being able to pivot. Once again, Nick seen the problem, we gave feedback, and he was on the phone from how long were you on the phone to about, all day to about 6:30 p.m. calling couriers and figuring the whole rate problem out. So it worked out in the long run, and we're fortunate that he did that. It didn't take him, nobody had to tell him to do it. He just hopped on the phone and did it.
So Nick and Larry, in your answer there, you hit on, I think, some of the why ScriptDrop is so uniquely positioned. It's a fairly complex, market segment that you're working within. There are a lot of different stakeholders. So how are you going about managing that? So one day you're dealing with couriers, the next day pharmaceutical companies, the next day pharmacies, the next day the software companies that provide, the pipes and plumbing for pharmacies. How do you manage all those different stakeholders in your equation?
So now we're breaking it up into roles. We hired someone to help with the pharmacy side, and he's managed teams and rolled out pharmacy solutions to Walgreens and CVS, so he's been through that process. So we're starting to kick most of the pharmacy communications to him. I need to do a better job for Albertsons because they're kind of my baby, so I need to just let him handle that because he's more than capable. And then Amanda, she has handled the pharmaceutical side because she has a lot of experience in that. So now we're having to work through the courier side of that. We need to bring someone on board to manage the courier relationships and contracting and rollout. But so the last couple of weeks, that we've all been helping to handle that by sending out RFPs, making phone calls, understanding their distribution and where they can make deliveries. One good thing about the courier network side is we just did our second integration into another courier platform. So we have about 800 courier companies across the U.S. to choose from, and that gives us coverage in all 50 states, which is something that Albertsons requested of us, because at one point we could not make a delivery in Hawaii, and as of 2 weeks ago, we can.
Great. The other thing you hit on was sort of being flexible with your business model and really iterating on how you charge, different stakeholders that benefit from what ScriptDrop's doing. So how have you dealt with sort of the uncertainty of how the business is going to make money in terms of making planning decisions? Because that seems like that's a pretty complex piece of the equation as well.
I think we always knew multiple parties would pay for the delivery, because if the dispense does not happen and the prescriber wrote the drug, wrote the prescription, and the health plan, they verify that this patient does need this, if they don't pick it up, everyone loses. There's 4 or 5 different interested parties that lose. So in that situation, we can sell to any of them. It was just making sure that what they would pay was higher than our costs. And then the whole chicken and egg problem. At scale, we will be hugely profitable on every single delivery. But I don't want to be one of those companies that has to raise $400 million to get to scale. I think that's a terrible business model, and it's not very sustainable, and there's just so many holes that I could go through and hit. One thing, about 2 weeks ago or a week ago, CVS announced that they partnered with Instacart for prescription delivery. So for probably 2 hours, 3 hours after that announcement, we were kind of all nervous, because Instacart has raised, I think, $700 million. They are comfortable with losing money on every single delivery for the next 2 years with CVS, and they could care less. So how do we beat a $4 price point for one of the largest pharmacies in the U.S.? About probably 4 hours after that announcement came out, another pharmacy chain emailed us, and we're in contracting with them already. He said it's because we are experts in pharmacy. We're a healthcare company. His exact quote was, he does not want a company that specializes in delivering green beans and milk to also deliver hydrocodone. He just thinks that's a bad mix.
That's excellent. So, guys, we're fortunate not just to have you as part of our portfolio, but you're also tenants in the facility and have ScriptDrop world headquarters right around the corner. Oh, that's right. We moved
bigger
down
office.
The other way. I've not checked out the new digs yet. Got to come down. So, talk about the importance of being in a place like Rev1 and the networking with other startup founders and what that means to the company.
I think it's key. I think if we were in a different setting, we wouldn't have events like this. Rev1 does a really good job at kind of keeping us in the loop of things that we should be at. They're aware of our time and what we have to do, but they keep us in the loop, and there's always something going on here at Rev1, where there's people from all different stages of companies and professional backgrounds that are just right here, which is huge. It's a lively place to be at, and I can't speak enough about that. Where everyone knows where Rev1 is at. Most people have been here at least once in their life, so Rev1 is just a happening place to be. So I think even when we were talking about moving to a different office, it was like a love it or list it thing. Like, do we go outside or we stay in here? And I think we landed on the right decision of staying in here. A lot of people know where it's at, good parking, so it worked out for us.
Outside of what he said, it goes back to the advisor question of, we don't know who could be an advisor for us, or what person we could get a lot of knowledge from. Because at the end of the day, we're all patients in healthcare. We've all been a patient. So we could learn something from anyone that we come across, and having those conversations more frequently increases the likelihood that we have some uncovered gem of a lady that went to the doctor and had this really terrible experience, and we have technology that could help address that.
Excellent. Well, thanks for those kind words about Rev1. Definitely appreciate that. So, appreciate everyone's attention to my questions, but I think it'd be wonderful to hear from some of the folks in the audience of questions that you all may have for Nick and Larry. So, Heather will be around. Shannon, too.
Yeah, I've got a microphone, so I'm going to pass around for any questions that we have. Tina, you're first.
Thank you. I'm Tina Fisher. Full disclosure, I am a member of OTAF and an angel investor in ScriptDrop. So love what you guys are doing. I'd like for you to talk about, let's say I am in the Alberts pharmacy. I wasn't able to get my prescription filled. So can you walk through that process of how you help that patient get the medication, and talk about class 2 meds as well and the delivery of those, and if you can give us some anecdotes around the courier services and how that's been positive, or some of the challenges around the courier services as well, if you'll do that.
So I'll start with the courier service because it hasn't become a problem yet, but it will at some point. The courier that drops off that drug, they are simultaneously the face of Albertsons and ScriptDrop. So if you have some courier that they don't care much about their job, they're having a bad day, they stub their toe in the morning, something like that, and they are mean to the patient, that reflects poorly on us and Albertsons at the same time. So that's something that we're hypersensitive to. And we include that in documentation to the couriers of just the best practices for interacting with patients. We'll do our best to mitigate the likelihood of that happening, but it will at some point. If we have 1 million deliveries, there will be one courier that is just a bad egg. So we're trying to address that very proactively. The experience for the patient is you go into the pharmacy and they offer the delivery. Let's say that it's an inventory issue and they have to order that drug from Cardinal and it's overnighted. So under normal circumstances, you would have to go back to the pharmacy the next day at 3:30 or 4, whenever Cardinal made that delivery. How it would happen now with Albertsons is you go in and the pharmacist offers delivery to you, and you excitedly agree because you don't have to make a return trip and you can just sign for it. And then at that point, we engage with you and we start texting you as the patient. So we let you know this delivery has been queued up for tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. And then you're able to interact a little bit with our bot. And then whenever you get the drug drop off to you, you sign on our courier mobile app, and then that signature is actually imported back into the pharmacy. That is huge for the pharmacies. It was intuitive to us that we needed to have that technology, but all the largest chains previously, they would have the courier return back with a hard copy form that the patient had signed. So that's additional paperwork that is easily lost, but the courier is also charging you for the return trip, so your cost is higher. And at that point, we can take the copay from you as the patient. So we can take cash, check, or card through Stripe Connect. So a big part of communicating with you by text is avoiding that happening. So you can let us know, hey, I need to change this time. I need to pick my son up at school at 4. I'll be home at 5:30. Can I move the delivery to then? And then we just ping the courier again, and they would change their route. So they're picking up 10 prescriptions or 15 prescriptions from that pharmacy, and they would just drop yours off last.
Just one other quick thing. Albertsons is one of your clients. Could you name a few others that you pick up? It sounds like CVS is not one of them, but
No.
can you give us some other insight? You can go after CVS as well, though.
So another pharmacy system is BestRx. They have about 1,200 independent pharmacies that have access. We will be able to announce another chain very soon that it'll be more relevant to people in Ohio.
Hi, Nick and Larry. Hello again. I'm Don Cavan. I'm with Illumination Works. In all honesty and disclosure, though, I used to work with Larry, so I'm very, very happy to see him up there, as you might imagine. You mentioned texting. Now, I was concerned about demographics. You know, you have a lot of grain of the population. For my 84-year-old mother, a text for her doesn't make sense. Are you guys incorporating any IVR for that? And then as a second question, it's separate, but I got thinking about, and I'm a little rusty at this from my healthcare days, but ambulatory versus hospital, and if that has come into discussion. Thanks.
So our integration with Twilio, there's another API call that we can query whether it is an SMS eligible phone, so a cell phone, or a landline. And if it is a landline, we will revert to robocall. So your 84-year-old grandmother would just get kind of a creepy call from a robocall. Yeah. And we are looking at the meds to beds type thing for ambulatory. So a lot of these hospitals, if they do run out of drugs, they will get them from their local pharmacies. If, like, say you come in with something that they weren't prepped for, or they're waiting on an order from Cardinal or McKesson, they will get the inventory from the local pharmacies. So that is something that we are having to vet out. It was a request that came in from a client on us taking over their Meds to Beds program.
Hi, I'm Kelly Denny, also from Illumination Works. I guess I had a kind of a similar question, but kind of about the demographics again, where, like, have you been able to address yet on patients who are currently using ScriptDrop or those who are most likely to use it compared with kind of the worst offenders and the demographics who are causing the healthcare system the large amount of costs that you referred to at the beginning?
The largest costs in healthcare are impoverished and elderly. And I guess you can think through some of the number of issues that those two subgroups would run into. And a lot of it for both of them is accessibility. So if you are making $5 or $7.50 is minimum wage, I guess, now, and you live in an apartment in New York City and you get hit with a $35 or $40 copay, you're not paying that. Because at that point, you're deciding between keeping the lights on the next month or your health. And it's an easy decision if you have children. So for them, it is just making the entire healthcare process cheaper through the copay buy down with the tokens and adherence, and also the free delivery of not charging them to drop it off at their apartment if they had to work a double shift at work and had no choice. But those are the two subgroups that all of our data show that it's elderly and impoverished.
I feel like Vanna White.
My question is, with your Albertsons business, I'm right here, Carl Ashinger, were you able to pick up Safeway's business? Because I sell to most supermarkets, and at that particular chain, the same EVP takes care of both.
So it does include Safeway. Their largest population or largest cluster of Safeway is in California, so it does include Safeway. They have about 18 brands under Albertsons, so if you don't recognize the name Albertsons, they kept all of the branding for each of these brands that they bought. So it's Albertsons, Randall's, Jewel, Osco, Safeway. It's a number of different brands, and it collectively is about 2,200 locations.
Hey, Nick, can you talk a little bit about competition? I know personally, you know, we've talked a lot, and you initially piloted in New York City, I think, against a competitor that was getting some traction there. Since that time, can you talk about either that competitor as well as who else is out there that, you know, maybe that, you know, is doing some innovative things such as, you know, what you guys are currently?
Yeah, so originally when it was just delivery, we had our competitor list was much shorter. And then you get into med reminders and then also including blockchain. The overlap analysis of our competitors is pretty expansive now. The original competitor you were speaking of was ZipDrug in New York City. So they had, at that point, had raised about $4 million or so. They launched in New York City. The issues that they didn't know that they would run into is they weren't integrated into the pharmacy like we are. So the pharmacist had to download an app, and so did the patient. And then they were charging the patients. Go back to the impoverished and elderly, those aren't the groups that are going to pay $25 for a delivery. You're basically catering to the kind of already wealthy or just they have expendable income. Since we launched in New York City, about 2 years after they launched, we've did more deliveries in the city than they have.
Hey guys, in your white paper that you released a few months ago, you had gone into a few of the reasons on why you chose to work with Hyperledger. Mm-hmm. Can you give us a little bit more detail about why you chose Hyperledger and your experience with it so far?
Yeah, so Hyperledger, it's a open source blockchain technology. So with Hyperledger, we are able to give you, the patient, control back of your data. So it's a permission blockchain. So I am of the very strong opinion that it is your data. It's the patient's data. But what happens in healthcare now is all of our data is sold. It's constantly sold. There's data feeds set up with all these different healthcare companies that are buying our data. We never benefit in that. They're monetizing the data and then we get nothing. So how our blockchain technology will work on the Hyperledger side is when you open up your data feed to more companies, your token allotment goes up. So you are essentially getting paid for more open access to your data. And at any point, since it's a permission blockchain, you can take that back from them or even just offer one-time access. So think of a pharmaceutical company running a clinical trial and they want to get a very certain demographic of patients. They can send us a message, we can communicate with that demographic of patients. You can reply yay or nay, and if you do, you would get tokens unlocked that you then can use for your next copay. Does that help?
What kind of reception have you guys seen from pharmacies and from insurance companies on the token offering? Are they excited about it? Are they indifferent, nervous about it?
It depends how you explain it. So before we went down this route, we met with a lot of pharmaceutical companies because that is, in theory, who would prop up the entire offering for the tokens. So the first time we explained it, I got real technical, and I lost them. Their eyes glazed over, and they completely were silent. We completely changed that process the next time and just focus on the application of the patient and for them, just business case. And since then, they've been very receptive. Because think if you're a pharmaceutical company, you really don't care about the technology. You just care about the application and then how it'll affect P&L statements. So once I explained it like that, the reception has been great.
Hi, I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on Amazon. I can't even hear what I hear and what you think about that.
He would like to get our thoughts on Amazon. So we don't know what ultimately Amazon will cause to happen in our business, but it has caused these chains to come to us because they are scared of Amazon displacing their business or completely disrupting it. So they have gotten with ScriptDrop, as small of a startup as we are, and they want to work with us on a solution for huge chains like Albertsons. So right now they're helping us out a lot. 6 years from now, I could hate them, but right now I really appreciate the rumors of them getting into pharmacy.
Nick, can you talk a little bit more about the copay buy down and how that helps the patient? Because I think that's extremely valuable, and I just want to understand that a little more.
Do you want the mechanics or just?
You can choose.
So with us, so we registered and got a BIN. So we're set up as a payer. So just like a PBM, every PBM has a 6-digit BIN number. So we have a 6-digit BIN number. We got that through NCPDP. So whenever the transaction is sent to us, the copay amount is sent to us. So at that point, we can buy down the copay, have a commitment of buying down the copay by sending back a different copay amount. And then what happens is we remedy that payment with the clearinghouse, or if it's a chain, we get it to them, that payment. And normally that's on net 30 terms. So if, let's say you walk into a Randall's or an Albertsons today and you have a token balance of $5, and we buy down your copay by $5, we get that $5 back to Albertsons 30 days from now. But you, the patient, you owe nothing right then.
So how do you choose whether I am selected to get a buy down? I mean, is it by demographic? How do you choose that?
So that'll be constantly tweaked on getting it right, but it will be an intersection of the drug you're taking, your health plan, and then also the zip code. And the main goal is to drive up adherence. So if there is a certain zip code or a certain area that the adherence is significantly lower, we need to have a weighted average that we give those patients a higher allotment of token to actually move the needle. If you're in a zip code that the adherence is very high, you don't need as much incentive to take your medication. You're already behaving the way that everyone wants you to as the patient.
Do we have any questions in the back? Way in the back? Oh, we got one here? Okay, great.
Hi, can you tell a little bit about what your sales are, number of employees you have, anything about your company profile?
Yes, so on the sales side, I don't want to say that. We are up to 8 employees, 8 full-time employees, and then we really rely on the courier network. So when those deliveries are being made, it's not our employees, they're essentially subcontractors of ScriptDrop, and at this point, we have integrations into 800 companies for that. And then on the pharmacy side, we have the deal with Albertsons and then with BestRx, and then the new chain we will announce in probably 3 weeks or so once everything is signed. A few people know about it now, but that'll be another really good thing that we can talk about. On the sales side, the sales process, the pharmacy pays for the delivery, but we also sign deals with pharmaceutical companies, and they pay for a portion of the delivery cost as well. The contracts with them come with a pretty large upfront fee, which for cash flow and sales looks great, but you still have to deliver on the product for the year long that contract is signed or the 2 years that it's signed.
Hey, Nick. It's Ryan. Couple of questions. One, are patients earning tokens right now through the pharmacies you're partnered with? And two, in terms of signing the patients up, Is that only done at the pharmacy, or is that something that your healthcare provider can participate in as well?
So the patients are not actively earning tokens right now. So we were going through the ICO process, or token sale, if you've seen that buzzword used. We ran into an issue that the distribution was pretty terrible. So we had a bunch of really large purchasers that would kind of allocate the entire token flow. And from economic terms, what that would do, it would set it up where later purchasers would be left with a token that was not very useful monetarily after that large purchaser dumped their tokens. So we are reassessing that side and distributing it better. So the tokens won't be in use until we have that token sale. Right now it is scheduled for March to focus on distribution so that everyone gets an equal deal. I'm not a big fan of the rich getting richer, so we wanted to address that actively. On the patients being able to sign up at the point of prescribing, we have a partnership with UpDocs, and that is something that will be part of that. So UpDocs is another Columbus company that's growing like crazy, and they have a universal inbox for healthcare providers, so for pharmacists, caregivers, and prescribers. And it's the second highest volume in the United States behind SureScripts. So that UpDocs' technology is how we could offer our service earlier in the process. They have integrations into about 80 EHRs right now.
Yeah, it's Dwight. Just had a quick question about the tech side of things. Larry, if you could speak a little bit about maybe some of the server infrastructure and what you guys had to do to get things set up on that aspect, especially around the HIPAA compliancy.
Dwight, you look a lot like Larry.
We're brothers.
As far as the tech side, we chose to use Amazon, ironically. But Amazon, they provide us with HIPAA compliant infrastructure, a lot of great tools for us to run lean and mean. Originally, we had in the middle, we were going with Rackspace, and they were kind of handling everything. But now, as we've grown and got accustomed to Amazon, and if anyone has ever used AWS, the slew of services is overwhelming. We've got used to it, and we brought that in-house, so now we control everything. And the good news is we used to have to pay like an insane amount just to be HIPAA compliant because you had to have a dedicated instance, and that was like an additional $1,500, $1,900 a month. They just released where you don't have to have that dedicated instance, and now we can lower our costs dramatically on the AWS side. So that was a piece of good news, and I'm telling that because I'm happy about it, because it was that barrier to entry for healthcare on infrastructure was super high. It was either build out your own resources or go with something like Amazon and pay that price to play ball. So it's pretty sweet now.
Some of the packages you were paying $5,000 a month roughly to have nothing, just to have the server stood up that's HIPAA compliant with zero data going through it. So the barrier to entry is pretty extreme.
I wanted to make mention of this too. Amazon does really good at any startups or people that are wanting to start. They have a program called Aws Activate, and you can apply for these credits so you can do a year. We did that for a while, but unfortunately the deal we have with Rackspace kind of terminated that early. But they give you up to $100,000 per year to do server space, so that's kind of cool. And I think,
Rev1 has a program as well for startups that provide some benefits relative to AWS utilization. So if you're a Rev1 engaged client, you can avail yourself of some of those resources too.
Hey guys, I know one of the biggest challenges would be getting companies to adopt your business. What are some of the challenges that you face in getting the local businesses to adopt your business?
You referring to Ohio? Yeah. Well, we don't have any pharmaceutical companies that we're actively selling to in Ohio. We were on 10 TV, and we had a lot of pharmacies reach out to us after that segment aired. And then I touched on it a little earlier. The contract that we'll be able to announce here in 3 or 4 weeks, it'll be comprised of some Ohio pharmacies that everyone recognizes that you probably shop at pretty frequently. And that was Amazon driving that. It was, this pharmacy chain knew they needed a delivery solution because Amazon is knocking on everyone's door, or at least they think they are. So they came to us, and they had emailed us and wanted a demo, and then everything is moving really, really quickly. So the sales cycle is shortening because they know that they have to innovate.
Did that opportunity in Ohio come from the Amazon being everyone's backdoor or the 10 TV segment?
Indirectly Amazon. So we had a former client that worked at another pharmacy that we worked with, that we're actively working with, and he got a promotion at a new chain, and we were one of the first companies that he emailed his first week on the job. So he already had that previous knowledge of us, so that's how things are getting pushed through very quickly. So we took care of a client that it then turned into new business.
Thank you all for your questions. I want to get everyone out of here on time. So again, we have Andrea in the back who is more than happy to, sorry, let me change this real quick, who is more than happy to give us a tour. And then please join us in January for our next Founders Story with Tina, actually. So you'll all get to ask her a lot of questions next time. So, all right, thank you all for coming. And if you have any questions, follow-up questions for Nick and Larry, they're going to hang around here for a few minutes longer.